And welcome back. It's another episode with us here at the Geek Centurions. Me, your boy Eli.
It's me, Joe.
Hey, we're here to talk about some recent news from Marvel. I don't know where to start. Joe, how about you start us off?
Well, it's more of like a lot of stuff that's been coming out of Marvel. Mainly, I think there was a recent book
Yeah.
with Kevin Feige in it,
Mm-hmm.
as well as a big Variety article about sort of behind the scenes going on at Marvel.
Yeah.
Some very interesting stuff being pointed out. Granted, a good chunk of it seems like it's kind of in the area of like rumor territory, right? Like there isn't like a whole lot of corroborating stuff for it. However, like it's still pretty it's
It's
telling.
also a lot of stuff that like we know, but it's worded in a way that's like very, very weird.
Yeah, like it's I guess it's kind of concerning if you're into the MCU, you know.
Yeah, if you're into like a lot of and we're also gonna be talking about that aspect too, just the general audience response to the recent stuff with it. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. How about you start us off?
Well, I think probably the big major one that came out of the Variety article was sort of Marvel's plans about having to deal with Jonathan Majors.
Yeah, if you haven't been keeping up, because it's very weird, like right? It's like he's either maybe guilty, maybe innocent. It's kind of the similar situation with like the Amber Heard Johnny Depp kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of the domestic violence stuff. You don't really know. He said, she said stuff coming out, right? I don't think he's been like you said, like been proven guilty of it, but obviously having essentially one of your big headline stars who's going to be, the main villain of your next phase of Marvel, uh, sort of having to deal with that sort of stuff is like, okay, yeah, that can be kind of a PR problem, similar to another superhero movie that had a problematic lead that kind of led to some, like, how do we move forward with this?
Yeah, how do we continue on? And so at this point, we like just to put like a cap on it, right? It's still being investigated. There's still a lot of stuff to go around, and there's still like a lot of information to be revealed. Because we
Right.
don't know. Because there's also been like stories of like he has receipts, kind of stuff. Like no, this is what happened, and but there's also the stories of this happening, and so like we won't be spending too much time on that. We're putting a cap on it. It's like it's still in debate.
Yeah, because mainly it's more of Marvel's response to the whole thing that we're gonna be looking at going into, which is by interesting, right? Because obviously there's two response. I mean, there's two things I think you could say Marvel could do in a scenario, right? Like this, it's either you do kind of go to the Warner Brothers route, where you keep that actor on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, granted, when it came to Ezra Miller and their whole shebang thing,
It's like okay, we can't ignore this.
Yeah, like at least the DC movies had the excuse of, oh, we're just gonna reset the universe after this Flash movie anyway, so we don't really have to keep using Ezra Miller as the Flash moving forward.
Yeah.
Here in the MCU, the Marvel instance, though, it's like, well, we already spent quite a bit of time setting up Jonathan Majors as Kang and all the variations of Kang, right? Which it does make it a bit difficult, but to I guess recast him. But I wouldn't say it's impossible, because that's the first option you could go with, right? Recast Jonathan Majors Kang to somebody else. It has happened before in the MCU, although albeit with actors that have been less controversial and more just like, yeah, we couldn't get them for time, and they wanted to do something else at the time. Famously, Rhodey was Terrence Howard replaced by
Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle.
We had Edward Norton being replaced by Mark Ruffalo.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Bueno, sí. That's fine. Anyways, keep on.
So there's that and like the a lot of the idea of the recasting, right? But to be fair, I kind of respect the idea that they're gonna wait and see, right? It sucks that he might still have a job if it's considered true, but it's also like okay, we can't, innocent until proven guilty. I say.
Yeah, I guess I understand from that perspective, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, they're already looking at ideas of like maybe having him off just in case, and I think their idea was going with more of Doctor Doom because this whole phase is centered around Kang, which, in my opinion, made sense when you introduced the whole time travel aspect in Endgame because you would not introduce Kang, who is very much like a time traveling villain.
Mm-hmm.
So like, oh, okay, you are at least like knowing what you're gonna do for the next setup for the movies. That makes sense. Um, you're going a little too hastily, in my opinion, in some aspects, but that's a different story. So it only made sense for them. Okay, we're going with Kang. Now they're introducing the idea of Secret Wars, which we all knew was coming, but my opinion still is like we went too far. Now, um, with that, uh, Doctor Doom has had a lot of influence in Secret Wars, both the first iteration and the newest one by Jonathan Hickman. So it makes sense. Um, Now a lot of people feel like, oh, this is them being like scrambling. This is like them trying to like trying to basically fix things on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And to that I say, Marvel has been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, again, like like you said earlier, right? Replacing Edward Norton with Mark Ruffalo, right? Granted, it's not like a big deal, but it's still kind of one of those things of like, hey, yeah, obviously it's a little weird seeing a different actor, but
Yeah.
you make that pivot, right? I mean, heck, I think the other thing I can think about, right, is the Inhumans
Yeah.
sort of thing, right? And heck, the inclusion of Spider-Man in Civil War, right?
Mhm.
There was the original script was gonna have no Spider-Man, right? Gonna have a bit more focus on Black Panther being sort of that intermediate role, right? However, once the Amazing Spider-Man movie sort of fell apart, Sony and Marvel came with a deal to like basically be like, hey, let's put Spidey in the MCU. We'll fit him into Civil War. Essentially get a Spider-Man movie out, push some movies back, and sort of get all that ball rolling, right?
Yeah.
Like Marvel clearly has the ability to like pivot on the fly if need be,
Mhm.
and I think that's what has been like one of their strengths as a sort of film franchise
Mhm.
over these past couple of years, right? They're not like DC that sort of just kind of like once they see like they kind of they're building the track as the train's moving.
Yeah.
And when they quickly realize that say for instance, hey, Batman v Superman hasn't gotten a lot of critical reception. Oh no, let's not only just quick pivot on Justice League, let's straight up just get like a bunch of like different edits for Suicide Squad out and try to make it a bit more that direction or Guardians of the Galaxy 5? No, oh okay, oh no.
Yeah, they're not as panicky at first. I'm gonna say at first because right now it's a very questionable state, right? Because at first, because like it was one of okay, we can adjust. We have backup plans, and that's kind of how we got to where we are now with Phase 3, which I think everyone agrees is probably the best phase of the entire Marvel stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's not a surprise to me that they're already making these adjustments, already planning ahead, already like doing this kind of stuff. I think the problem though it is that for them is that time. ironically, their issue is time because they didn't have to push that much back when it came to some of these movies.
Yeah, like with the inclusion of Spider-Man, all you really did have to do was just film maybe a couple additional scenes and rewrite the script a bit, because at the end of the day, the Civil War movie kind of works without him. When you think about it, and all you really need to do is start, setting up like a Spider-Man film series now, which you can easily sort of do and like place wherever you need it to be.
Yeah, it also makes sense that that first one, Homecoming, has so much like actors from like already established MCU stuff, like Pepper, Tony, and Happy, right? Like we already got them. All we gotta do is focus on these new characters. We already established that, so we'll just have them probably filming around the same time as Civil War or anything in between those movies that we need them for, and to help them push it out.
I mean, yeah.
I'm speculating. I'm not saying this is what happened.
Yeah, but point being is that I guess the big issue is that well, I guess the more interesting thing about it is that Marvel sort of, because again, these aren't final, these are things that have been said, right? Because Marvel is clearly thinking of, hey, what's the backup if this whole thing sort of falls apart? Let's pivot to Doctor Doom, who is another big MCU, like Marvel villain that they can use.
One of their biggest, in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously the Fantastic Four movie is going to be coming out in the coming years, so kind of like helps set some stuff like that up.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to lay some pieces there, and you got to be at least commend them for like thinking, okay, let's just try to see what we can work with here, because obviously if you're not gonna recast, and to go on a slight tangent later, but if you're not gonna recast, then I guess going with a different villain could work in that scenario. It's like if I guess it's like if Josh Brolin, who played Thanos, turned out to have conflicts or just a falling out with the studio, then it's like, well, crap, we were gonna use Thanos. Who would we replace him with? And it'd be like, why don't we just pivot to Ultron? To be fair, Ultron is also probably would have been a cool, interesting villain, cause he's a robot. He can always make copies of himself, that sort of thing. But to get back to the point I was talking about a bit earlier, when it comes to the recasting stuff, it's something that I think a lot of people have been saying that you can kind of get away with, because of not only of the previous times Marvel has recasted, but also just there is a good way of hand waving it in terms of just multiverse.
Yeah.
Right? Because obviously, with No Way Home, there are 3 different Peters. They don't look anything alike. Obviously, I mean, granted, it's because of age, but also they just don't look anything alike.
Yeah.
You have Loki's, like all the different versions of Loki out there, that we had. So in theory, you could just go and say, oh, let's cast, and this is me throwing a name out there, which would be kind of cool, but don't see it happening. Let's say Keith David gets recasted as Kang the Conqueror, and their explanation is that he's the original Kang, That's why he's older and, a bit more, that sort of thing, right? Like, that'd be kind of cool to have Keith David in the MCU like that. But at the same time, that's like only, that's an example, right?
Yeah.
Granted, maybe it can work, maybe it won't. I mean, who knows? That that sort of thing, right?
No, I don't disagree. But I feel like the thing about it is that people have been saying like good this a long time ago. They're waiting and seeing. That's the thing, guys. That's the whole point of this. It's a wait and see, right? Like you can't just immediately like throw them out and be like, oh, we're sorry, dude. We didn't know you were innocent.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like what happened with Johnny Depp when he got fired as, I believe, what was his, Grindelwald?
Yeah.
From the Fantastic Beasts movies, because of the whole Amber Heard thing. It's because they had a bunch of those there they had to keep filming, and it's like, well, we can't just wait for our who's our main villain to just not make these more movies. We can't just write him out as much as I guess they would have liked to. So we have to fire him and then like rehire somebody else to carry that role and just sort of hand wave why he looks different, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it's a bit different there because Marvel does have essentially time to at least if they need to pivot or recast, because obviously Secret Wars isn't coming out until I want to say what 2026.
I lost count. I know they're pushing a lot of stuff back.
Which that is also something to make note of too. They are pushing stuff back.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's one of those interesting. It's a very I guess I wouldn't say complicated, but it's one of those situations where like you can understand sort of the once you look into it, you can kind of understand where Marvel's coming from in the perspective of like, we don't know where to go from here, or we're gonna just try to not put all we seem to have maybe put all our eggs in one basket here, and now we're just trying to make sure we put some eggs in a different basket in case this first basket of eggs doesn't all crack and stuff. We at least have something to salvage it with. Something else about the Variety article as well is just mainly more on like it's partially the Variety article, but also a lot of stuff that has been coming out recently is just a lot of the rumors of potentially having the OG Avengers cast come back.
Yeah. And there's a lot of weird readings onto that situation. But I always thought that was always the plan at some point, right?
Yeah,
like I think a lot of people read it as like they're gonna bring back Iron Man for another set of movies, and Captain America for another set of movies. Because I always read it as like, oh, we're gonna bring him back for Secret Wars eventually, because that would be the best place to put him back.
Yeah, because I think what most people are saying, because they're saying, oh, it's gonna be a new Avengers movie with the OG cast back or whatever. I think what makes probably more sense, and probably the whole thing that they were probably thinking about doing anyway, to sort of have a, because how are you going to have an endgame moment for Secret Wars, right? Because obviously the endgame moment in Avengers Endgame was, everybody coming back from the snap, the whole big reveal, the portal scene basically, right?
Yeah.
Just everybody showing up, getting ready to like fight, Cap goes, Avengers assemble, crowd goes crazy, that sort of thing. So what are you gonna do to like sort of redo that sort of moment? Because you can't recapture it. You can only like do something similar, but also have enough of an effect of like, oh, that's I'm down for that. It would be the OG cast coming back to help out our new heroes, right? Because multiverse, time travel, like it would make sense if in like the big climactic moment, the original Avengers all show up and are like, all right.
It's just a different like multiverse character or time travel. Like you said, it makes sense. Like it's not that, but like I feel people, and this is where I kind of want to get to later, is that I feel like people are just ready to write them off as like running out of ideas. Right. It's the idea that they couldn't rely on these new characters, and like they had to go back to the old because either it's not doing out so well or they're not being received well enough for whatever reason. Probably, I don't know what could be the reason for, but that's to each their own. Because like that is a thing. Like people are speculating like these new characters aren't working, and there's some good reasons for it, and there's some bad reasons for it. But hearing that they're thinking about bringing back the original cast, it sounds more desperation than something that would most likely make sense.
Yeah, I think most people are reading it that way.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see Tony, Robbie Downey Jr. back as Tony Stark. Chris Evans back as Captain America. But it's also one of the things they as a studio understand, like, we gotta give him time. We can't bring him out this fast. We're still setting up stuff. Or, we gotta give these new characters a chance. And sometimes, ironically, kind of like in the world of comics, they aren't received very well until later on they're like, oh, you know what, I kind of like them too. That's usually how that happens.
which I would feel like it's kind of interesting because
Yeah.
you know that's it does sort of feel like that's like maybe the one thing about the MCU that that might be reflecting from the comics, right?
Yeah.
Whenever there's sort of a new change of the guard, right?
Mhm.
In terms of the comics, not a whole lot of readers like that, and you kind of see I guess a similar effect to that. Where like, yeah, not a whole lot of people who are invested in MCU early on are kind of like vibing with new characters,
Yeah.
you know,
Or
like
even different concepts.
yeah,
Like, and part of it is the quality, right? The quality isn't so good, whether it be like restrictive of time, not enough people being in charge, or not enough time to give. It's a lot of shit that goes into it, right?
mm-hmm.
We talked about this with like Secret Invasion. Secret Invasion had like a really good idea to be like this really like kind of like almost not a long running show, but like a very like poignant short like one season kind of thing, almost kind of like a HBO's Watchmen kind of thing. But it kind of ended up fizzling out and like not being about much. Because like we remember what we said what we thought would be really cool if they went really hard on this sort of conspiracy thing, but they kind of didn't.
Yeah, it's yeah, I remember. It's by the way, if you want to hear more of those thoughts, we have we read Secret Invasion. Go
Yeah.
watch those videos.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it feels like the ending felt almost like the halfway point.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been cool if that was the halfway point, but instead it's like, oh, that's where we're okay. I guess that's where it at. Okay, cool.
Mm.
All right, sure. Sure, we could have had some fun concepts here, but no.
Yeah, and it's even funny because like I feel like the idea of them trying to go more into like the wackiness or like the otherworldly stuff would make sense. I remember people in my job were like, "Wait, they're doing aliens?" I'm like, "Bro, they've been doing aliens for a long time. That's always been the point." And they're doing like a thing with the scrolls that it's been done like forever now. Because they're always this, like I said before, they're always like this sort of like nod to like McCarthyism, the Red Scares, and like, what would you do that now? You would do it like something like nowadays. What would you do that with modern way of telling it?
Mm-hmm.
What would it be? Crazy conspiracy theorists,
Mm-hmm.
like that. Uh, but yeah, no, it's clearly that they're kind of like in this weird a- aspect of like not knowing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's another part of that article where we were talking about it in a minute, but yeah, like it's this weird thing where like they don't give it a chance or like it's not received. It's like it's a bit of both.
Right.
And my worry is that again this often happens with a lot of creators, whether it be like of a group or a single person. They take some of the negative aspects and like either double down or try to course correct in the middle rather than try to focus on telling what they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So and like we'll get into that aspect later in a minute. But what was the other part of the article that or the news that came out that we need to talk about?
Mainly, I know there's I think these next two stuff that I've been seeing floating around are kind of interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think one definitely has to do with, I guess, the whole Blade movie. I believe there was a obviously because that movie's been having some bit of a development issues.
Oh,
right?
Fuck, yeah, it should have been out by now.
Yeah, I think so, but yeah, just a whole lot of like script writing issues. I believe there was mention of how there was a version of the script
Mm-hmm.
where Blade was sort of not the main focus character. Like he was obviously he's the main character,
Yeah.
right? But like he sort of played a bit more of a background role, kind of. Like I believe it was worded that he was like the fourth major lead, while judging from how it was being, how the comments about it were being written, it felt like it was a bit more female led, sort of a passing of the torch kind of vibe from it, which I know obviously there was definitely some discussions about all that, but it's an interesting sort of look, because again, it's a bit rumored, and that's obviously, I believe that's not what the Blade movie is going to be now, because obviously they've had a bunch of rewrites for that movie, and I think, you know, it would be kind of weird if it was like that, especially for for a Blade movie, right?
Yeah.
Um,
But it also sounds like it's like that. I like something like some weirdo online will come up with.
yeah, yeah. Um, but I think in terms of that speculation, it's like I guess if it I don't think that that's gonna be the movie itself. Again, it was like a version of the script that was being talked about.
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure has been rewritten at this point because I think they're still filming. So it's probably not gonna be the movie, but it is sort of a kind of an interesting look into like. So maybe that's the reason why the Blade movie hasn't gotten off, because maybe Marvel was sort of looking at Blade more of like, let's use him as a jumping off point to introduce a bunch of other new characters. Because I'm guessing maybe Marvel doesn't have enough confidence to have what's the actor's name?
Mahershala
Ali to like be staying in the MCU for long. Or so they're just sort of like, okay, let's just have a Blade movie, but it's him passing the torch on to a next generation, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people wouldn't like to see, because you would rather see Blade himself in the MCU and maybe sort of interacting with a couple different characters rather than just have his first movie just being a passing of the torch movie. So yeah, it's
yeah. Now, even so, you gotta remember, even he was mentioned in the Eternals movie at the end.
Yeah, the post credits is just him off screen telling what's his name, Dane Whitman? What's his name, right?
Just go, yeah.
The Black Knight.
Yeah, the Black Knight.
The Black Knight about to grab his cursed magical sword. It's like, you sure you want to go down this road?
Yeah.
You aren't ready for this.
Yeah, it's implying like something like the Midnight Suns. But yeah, no, I never like to overly speculate, right? Because I feel like because I'm not in the room, I can't be saying stuff that I don't know about. I don't want to like put stuff in people's mouths. But like the it does sound like they don't have confidence in it, or like they can't figure out what's the best way to go about it. And I've seen people say it online, but like, oh, just do it like this, do it like this, do it like this. I'm like, okay, but you're just saying the bare bones of what you want the movie to be about. That doesn't mean that movie's gonna come out looking like that, right? Because I can make a movie that's like for example, like Silver Surfer, one of my favorite characters in all of Marvel. Like I would make it sort of like this existential movie about him floating in space, having existential moments, having a lot of serious monologues, and people were like, "Yeah, that sounds cool. That sounds like Silver Surfer," but I don't know how to go about that. What is he gonna be talking about? What's the story? It can't be just that. I need to put some like meat in that in that sandwich or something.
Yeah, like it's like you're going out. It's like you want to make a gourmet burger, right? Like a Chef Ramsay inspired gourmet burger, but all you got is a bunch of white toast, a piece of ham, and some old cheese flying around. It's like, how are you gonna? You don't got the parts here to assemble it.
Yeah.
You kind of just like you're just writing down what you would like on a sandwich, and it's like, okay, now how do I do this?
Exactly. Like there's a lot of things that go into filmmaking, and a lot of people tend not to know about it or just like make assumptions about it without actually like knowing how film works and knowing what goes into making films and stuff. But my hope is with the Blade movies that at least adheres to what Blade is about. That's all I kind of would want the Blade movie to be, right? That's really all I wanted to come out as. What was the other part of the article that everyone was talking about?
Well, and this one I'm not sure if it was a part of the article, but I believe it was just something that was sort of brought up a bit. Hold on, let me check again. Yeah, just it's more of I guess potential plot stuff for Deadpool 3 and also Secret Wars potentially.
Yeah.
That being that I think Deadpool 3, obviously I think we kind of know that it seems like it's going to be like a Deadpool kills the Fox Marvel universe or whatever, something like
Yeah.
that. It feels like it's gonna lean towards that, but it's mainly just TVA. I think it's implied that maybe at some point the plot, or I think maybe the aftermath of that movie is going to be the TVA recruiting a bunch of different heroes from different universes to assemble and fight the Kangs for Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, which I think leads to rumors of potentially Tobey Maguire coming back as Spider-Man and obviously Hugh Jackman being Wolverine, and they're sort of leading, along with the TVA, sort of a multiverse squad of heroes to stop the Kangs. Which is definitely interesting. Like I know I've seen some people say that's probably like I've seen reactions of being like that actually sounds kind of cool. I like that, but I think it's mainly because it's just Tobey Maguire and Hugh Jackman back as Spider-Man and Wolverine.
Again, it sounds like one of those things where like we're just throwing ideas at the wall, seeing what sticks and what we can work with.
Yeah, because again, this is definitely more on the rumor side than actual facts. I think. Because again, if true, that I mean, yeah, it is cool. But at the same time, you're kind of, at least I'm kind of wondering, how the hell does that work?
Exactly.
Well, how do we get to that point? What's the...
Yeah, a lot of these like news about like, oh, it's probably about this is that. It's still speculative, guys. Calm the fuck down.
Right. Yeah. I think that's most of like the Variety article. I mean, I know there's a little bit of like some people saying that it feels like a little too much of hampering on like the
yeah,
all these new, I guess, diverse heroes are like tanking the Marvel universe, and it's like that's a little bit of weird reading if you think about it, especially because none of the article mentions Black Panther or Black Panther 2, which were both very successful films.
Yeah, no. Part of it, part of me thinks right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that aside from like that weird side, um, is that we got to a point where I feel like a lot of people just would rather it be over. They feel that it should have been done a long time ago, specifically with Endgame. But the thing about comic books and like superhero comics specifically, so they kind of keep going. There is no end. It's like never been about telling an ending. There's always a new adventure. There's always a thing to fight. There's always something to tell. That's always been like the thing with superhero comics, specifically like Marvel and DC. Like even Invincible. Like okay, I'm not gonna spoil Invincible, but it does have an ending, but it's also an ending like the story goes on. Like I'm not gonna tell you more stories, but just to let you know, the story goes on. There's more to tell, but I'm not gonna tell it. There's always more to tell, but I'm not gonna tell it. And when you get to that ending, with hopefully the Amazon Prime series, gets to do, I'm pretty sure they will. That's kind of the thing about comics. Again, specifically these specific kind of comics. So they're kind of never ending, right? They all have their own little aspects of the stuff that continues on. It was never gonna be like an infinite end. Not an infinite end, but like
a
definitive end. Yes. To this whole Marvel stuff. Even Kevin Feige himself was like, "No, we still got more stories to tell."
Yeah, which he did say in his book. Like we have there's still more stories to tell. There's still a bunch of cool, interesting characters to like showcase and all that stuff. And I think this is something I think I might have mentioned a bit earlier, but it does feel like that the obviously the cool thing about the MCU is having all these various different characters in this sort of shared universe that can interact with each other sometimes, but have their own adventures, right? Like part of I think the strategy of the MCU, and I think this is like the actual real MCU formula, not like the MCU formula just throw jokes in half the time, blah blah blah. No, the MCU formula I feel like has always been just make quality movies and make audience think they need to watch all of them, because you really don't have to watch all the movies. At least starting from like phase 1 through 3, right? You don't really need to watch all the movies to get like the gist, right? If you go watch Iron Man 1 and 2 and then go to Avengers, like you can still follow that story perfectly fine. Heck, a good chunk of Avengers is kind of sort of just like reintroducing some characters. I mean, heck, Cap has his boxing scene where he's having flashbacks to the previous movie. You get like Black Widow scene that just sort of introduces her. Oh, she's a secret agent. Like there, simple enough, right? You get a bit more backstory with Thor and Loki, because obviously Loki's the main villain, Thor's his brother, that sort of thing. Bruce Banner, Hulk, it's like, oh, okay, this guy,
he gets angry.
He gets angry. That's his shtick, right? Tony Stark, he's a billionaire playboy philanthropist with a suit of armor, right? Like pretty much that's how that works, and you can pretty much do that with a lot of the other stuff, right? Like you can watch, say, Captain America 1, 2, who like you can follow Captain America's story by just watching the stuff that he's in and have a general idea. Like you don't have to watch Iron Man 3 or Thor 2 to understand Cap's whole story in the MCU. You can just watch the stuff that Cap is in, right? But it's all the connective tissues of the MCU sort of make you feel like you need to watch everything else, because then you'll be like more intuitive and more like looking at, oh, okay, that's where that goes, or like, oh, that's connected, and stuff like that. That's sort of like the thing about the the cinematic universe. But much like comic books, where it's like, oh yeah, sure, you can just start wherever and just follow that sort of line. And if you want to like get into, say, the big event stories, like, yeah, you don't need to read all the stuff. However, sometimes because much like a comic book universe, there are some moments where you're kind of just like, okay, but what's that? Like where is this going? Does it end here? What are we still going? Like, what's going on, right? And the MCU does that, is doing that now. It's like, okay, we have essentially the next generation, which I feel like, honestly, it feels like this side of Marvel was always going to have growing pains.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously it doesn't help that it feels like it's like, I think you mentioned like earlier, right? Like this whole phases so far has been kind of more of just throwing stuff at the wall, trying out some new different things and seeing what works, what doesn't. And it does feel like Kevin Feige and the people at Marvel are sort of just like
scrambling now.
I mean, I wouldn't say scrambling, but it definitely just feels like it's a bit interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the Jonathan Majors stuff is probably what is causing them to scramble, but like outside of that context, a lot of the MCU, it's like, yeah, like where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Kind of vibes, right?
It's the thing where, for me, like with these things, is like they're playing it by ear, and for a lot of people, it's like, okay, we've grown tired of what you've done. We want something new. We're getting the new, but it doesn't feel new, right? And for me, like I said, I would want to see that Silver Surfer movie about him having an existential crisis in space. Just floating about, talking about how he wants to find Zen Law or whatever, or like his home, his lover that he lost for years, and people would be like, "What the fuck is this movie?" Right? Like for me, I kind of want them to be more like out there and weird, kind of like how I've always known Marvel to be. Like, I mean, both Marvel and DC are weird, but like Marvel's weird cosmically, DC is weird magically.
Mhm.
So like I kind of want to see more of that, and that's just me. Even like personally for me, I think like they kind of need to start changing it up, doing something unique and different, while still being sort of themselves. You know?
No, definitely, and I think um like probably one of the more interesting things about it, with this sort of constant discussion is like two things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, First is that you know, do you think Marvel would have been in this position if they just decided to say, "Hey, screw it"? Like once we got Fantastic Four and X Men, we should have just started rushing those out instead of having to rely on a bunch of the other like sort of B list characters that we have because it feels like because obviously I mean people forget this all the time, but Iron Man was a B list character before the Iron Man movies.
I didn't give two shits about Iron Man, to be honest.
I mean, he was cool, I guess, but that's because he had a suit of armor. But I didn't care about Tony Stark as the person. But the movies sort of like, okay, yeah, cool. Robert Downey Jr. brings character, to Iron Man and Tony Stark. It's at this point, it's like, you can't imagine.
Listen, his most well known story is him finding his alcoholism.
Yeah, back in the day, right? Yeah,
That's the only story people cared about. Maybe Armor Wars, but like his most well known story is that.
yeah, and that was the thing with the MCU, like that it was wholly birthed because Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios kind of didn't have their A-listers. They didn't have Spider-Man. They didn't have the Fantastic Four. They didn't have the X-Men. They had to rely on the B-list talent to sort of push them above and beyond, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
made it work. And personally, I think there is a little bit of like still having to use that, even though, of course, Marvel has the X-Men and Fantastic Four film rights back. I mean, Sony and Marvel have been playing pretty nice in terms of Spider-Man stuff. So you can definitely rely on it now,
Mm-hmm.
but for whatever reason, we kind of wanted to build up more of the B characters. I mean, granted, we are going to get Fantastic Four eventually here, and I'm pretty sure, like, the aftermath of Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars will probably set up a whole like phase of Marvel that's just about the X Men and stuff, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I feel like that's what Kevin Feige means. Like, we haven't even told any of the X Men story yet. Aren't you guys excited? It's like, well, yes, but like, it'd be kind of cool if we saw it now. I mean, I get probably the reason why was just to put distance away from the Fox Marvel stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem a bit of an interesting hindsight of like, you know, yeah, like X Men and Fantastic Four would have been probably have propped up and we wouldn't be having this discussion if they were here earlier,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I think the second thing, and this is more relevant to like right now because as of recording, the new trailer for the Echo show
Yeah.
came out and people are abuzz about it because it is M rated or not M rated, rated,
MA.
it's basically MA, right? It's
Yeah.
which is rated R for TV,
Yeah.
and people are looking like this and like, oh shit, this looks actually kind of good maybe.
Yeah.
It's like a weird thing with the. Granted, it's probably because of the two different communities, but it's always like, oh, friggin' Loki came out. Yeah, Marvel still's got it. Like, oh no, Ant-Man and Quantumania came out. It sucks. It's so over, guys. And then it's like Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Oh, we're so back. A constant string of like, we're so back. Oh, it's all over, guys. Marvel's done. Oh wait, friggin' Loki season 2. All right, we're back in it. All this stuff about Jonathan Majors and like the turmoil behind the scenes of Marvel. Oh, it's so over, you
Oh
guys.
my god, She-Hulk is terrible. Ah, fuck you guys. It's fine.
Yeah, that constant string of like, I think it's definitely because of the two different sides of the fan base sort of going back and forth. Although the Echo show does look interesting,
Yeah.
you know.
It's the first time going very MCU wise, very adult,
Yeah,
and like who knows that can come out. And like for me, like the fact that it's goes back and forth of being good and bad, just kind of tells you like we're gonna be all right.
But yeah,
Like we're like as a we're not looking for massive hits every time. We just want you to be good.
yeah, and I think it's more showing of I think what you said earlier, like quality.
Yeah.
We need the quality back
Yeah.
because it feels like a bit of too much has shown cracks of quantity
Yeah.
rather than focusing on the
And
quality.
the quantity came because of the response to COVID.
A little bit, right?
Yeah, a lot of people think like, oh, well, did they get a break? No, they did not get a break. They did not. But we're coming back from it, and we should be getting something good soon, hopefully. But I think consistent quality is fine enough, and I think that's a really nice way to end it now. We've been here for a lot longer than I wanted it to be, but that's fine. But if you guys enjoyed what you heard, be sure to follow us on all social medias, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Geek Centurions, and be sure to uh, follow us on Instagram where we're most active. You can find a link to all podcasts that's first part of Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora. YouTube is there for all you audio listeners out there who want to put a face to the voice. Like, comment, subscribe, and Patreon for everyone to support. But yeah, it's been good, guys. It's been me, boy Eli.
Give me Joe.
You guys have a good one. Hopefully, Marvel will learn from their lessons. Enjoy.